perhaps by accident, certainly not by plan. Things are a little quiet around the Steelers at the NFL Combine as things got going today on a Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. This is the Southside Beat as we are at 3 p.m. on that Monday through Friday. He's Chris Halicke. I'm Corey Crisan in Indianapolis, not at the convention center because, quite frankly, my day just wrapped up a little bit early-ish today, even though I also got a really early start by getting there just before 8 o'clock this morning.
How was the line for credentials, by the way?
Long, but I was early enough. Parked early enough, walked in early enough. I didn't have to wait that long.
Good stuff.
All good.
Yeah, that line will get pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy last year. Thankfully, I got there where I only waited in line for about maybe 20 or 30 minutes. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week until Omar Khan speaks. Obviously, his interview or his press conference was delayed again. Due to his family situation, and so don't know when he's going to talk. I would assume it would be at some point this week that he will address the media.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, man, especially with the Bears talking and everything like that, man, these rumors are going to get. And you know what? I'm giving into them a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So with Chalk Talk, which will drop tomorrow, we're going to take a look at quarterbacks.
There you go.
We're going to take a look at quarterbacks. And when I say we're going to take a look at quarterbacks, I mean, we're going to take a look at what quarterbacks fit based off of X's and O's, not based off of roster speculation or, implications of, okay, well, if you do this, you're giving up on Kenny or no, let's just look at X's and O's.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the best fit. And then after that, we can kind of decipher, okay, maybe now we can, and Chris, Chris brings up a point. Please know Justin Fields is not a good fit. I kind of disagree a little bit.
A
little bit.
Not.
It's not that he's not without his flaws. There's a reason why the Bears are willing to move on from him after year 3.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark does bring up a good point here. To something. There's two sides of this. Okay. Mark says when there's smoke. Okay. So when there's this much smoke, you got to kind of wonder that there's at least a better than 0.0% chance that this trade actually happens. Right. Now, personally, I still don't think this trade happens. I still think the most likely scenario, and I will continue to say this over and over again, so people don't think that that I'm trying to push some sort of narrative here, that the most likely scenario is that Mason Rudolph resigns and the Steelers quarterback room is led by Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and they will battle it out at training camp at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, and that will decide who the Steelers quarterback will be in 2024. That is the most likely scenario here.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's smoke, when there's smoke, you got to kind of wonder if there's a fire somewhere. And so, and listen, Jim also brings up a good point. Free agency quarterback talk makes more sense since we only have one quarterback on the roster. Whether it's a trade or free agency, the Steelers have to add to the room. Regardless, they have to add to the room, which is why we can't just assume that Mason Rudolph is going to be the guy because, well, he's not on the roster right now. He still has to sign his name on the dotted line. Mark
here says, I can't believe we are still talking about Fields. Here's the reason why we're still talking about Fields is because, believe it or not, it's actually worth something talking about. This isn't nothing. If this was nothing, we wouldn't be talking about it. But This whole Justin Fields thing is not nothing. This is something. I'm not saying there's a ton of substance to it. I'm not saying it's going to happen and it's foregone and it's only a matter of when.
Yeah.
It's not a zero chance. It is a non-zero chance that Justin Fields could be traded to Pittsburgh. It's just sole diligence. It's sole, Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, doing his diligence. Omar Khan doing his diligence. If Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin and the powers that be in Pittsburgh see a fit, okay, could the price work? Would it be something the Steelers are willing to give up? What happens with Mason Rudolph? There has to be a gauge with Mason Rudolph.
Mm-hmm.
And today, again, Omar Khan did not speak. He is not in Indianapolis. He is with his family after a death in the family. So he will, assumingly, although we have not heard word yet, join sometime this week in Indianapolis, and we'll actually get to hear from him. All I could go off of is what I heard today, and that was the Bears head coach, the Bears GM speaking in Indianapolis today. And those guys, they seemingly want to do right by Fields. In fact, polls said as much. They want to do right by Justin Fields. They want to make sure that they can get Justin Fields to a team. This has to synergize. They have to get Justin Fields to a team where, if they want to do right by him, where it will semi-fit him and he'll have a chance to play. And number two, the Bears have to get a desired return back. Those two things have to marry, M-A-R-R-Y, in order for the Bears to deal Fields. Now, again, I wrote this last night in kind of an advancer for the Combine. The Bears, I think, hold the cards in this situation. They have the first pick. They have the 9th pick. They have Justin Fields. They have a guy on a rookie contract. Yeah, they have to decide on the 4th-year option.
5th year.
But 5th year, going into his 4th year. They have to decide on that 5th-year option, but they still have time. They still have all these meetings to do. Like Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels, Drake May, they're not throwing here in Indianapolis. They're not going to throw at the Combine. So those meetings are going to be huge. And who knows, they may not like any of the guys. There was a report that came out that Caleb Williams maybe wasn't too thrilled about the idea of going to Chicago. Then his camp shot that down and it became a thing. Like, the reason why we're talking about the idea of Justin Fields potentially being traded to the Steelers is because it's not a non-zero thing. Or rather, it is a non-zero thing. It's not a 0% chance. That's why.
Well, Mike in Texas says, but it goes against everything that Tomlin and Rooney said a few weeks ago. If Fields or Wilson come, it should be in a starter's role. It does go against what Tomlin and Rooney have said, which is why we continue to hammer home that the most likely scenario is Mason Rudolph resigns, and the quarterback room is Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and whoever as the third quarterback. And so, but there has to be contingency plans in case Mason Rudolph doesn't sign. There just has to be. Omar Khan is not doing his job if he doesn't have contingency plans, if Mason Rudolph doesn't resign. And at that point, he would actually not be doing his job if he didn't at once or just once talk to the Bears and gauge what the price is for Justin Fields. That doesn't mean just because Omar Khan, if it's ever confirmed that Omar Khan made a call to the Bears, that's a GM just doing his job. That doesn't mean that the Steelers were close to acquire. Like, no, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the GM doing his job and seeing what's there. If the Bears demand the sun, moon, and stars, then okay, well, that's not a possibility for us. Let's move on. But you don't get that answer without making that phone call. And so, but the other side to this coin, by the way, for these NFL rumor pages, block these things, dude. Block them.
Nope.
Because you will see this stuff right here, and this is why you're going to get Justin Fields hate, because this says, rumor alert, the Steelers have offered the Bears their round 2 pick, as well as some additional later round picks for Justin Fields. However, the Bears currently want the Steelers' first round pick in return, and Deontay Johnson is also a name that has been brought up in talks. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you how. I know it's absolutely false, but I cannot begin to tell you how angry that makes me, because there will be so many people that buy that as even if it's it could be slightly true. No, it's not. It's not true. If the Steelers ever ended up making this trade, I don't see them giving up anything more than a 3rd round pick in terms of the highest quality asset. 3rd round pick would probably be the highest thing that they would probably give up. 3rd round pick this year with maybe a couple of later round picks in future years.
So there were 3 teams that I really wanted to lend my ear to today after I discovered that Omar Khan was not going to be given a press conference. And really, I mean, just to be blunt, there wouldn't be any Steelers-worthy news or, anything coming directly from Omar Khan publicly today. There wouldn't be anything direct coming publicly.
Yeah.
There were 3 teams who I wanted to lend ears on: the Bears, the Vikings, and the Broncos. Now, when I'm thinking about, and as a consolation, the Falcons, and I'll get to the Falcons in a moment because, with Arthur Smith and that link and everything. Bears we're talking about now. It seems like the Vikings are really intent on getting Kirk Cousins back and finding a way to work something out with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
And obviously they have to pay Justin Jefferson still. And Justin Jefferson went on Radio Row Super Bowl week and said, back up the Brinks truck, pay me. And he's right, by the way, probably the best receiver, if not top 2 at minimum right now in the league. So
how much time did he miss last year and still had a 1,000-yard season?
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous what he was able to do still. But so I lend my ear to the Vikings and what they were doing. And Kevin O'Connell was pretty adamant about, we need Kirk Cousins, saying it without saying it, of course.
Yeah.
We need Kirk Cousins. And if that's a guy that, forget interest for a second, okay? Forget legitimate interest from the Steelers. If that's a guy who could be a name, like, what if they went out and got Kirk Cousins? What if that's a name that's floated out there? It just seems really, it seems like there's a real intent from Minnesota, and you can't blame them to bring Kirk Cousins back for the right price.
Yeah. And just to continue to hammer this home, Joseph says the Steelers are going to either re-sign Mason or bring in Tannehill. And I do think that, and I continue to say, re-signing Mason is the most likely scenario here in terms of adding to the room.
I agree.
And I think signing Tannehill is kind of, it's probably more likely than a Justin Fields trade. It just depends on what the asking price is for Fields, because
I think Tannehill's a fail-safe, if anything.
But that's not a fail-safe you can just rely on being there, because there might be a team that's willing to snag him early in free agency. Remember, legal tampering period starts 2 weeks from yesterday, I think.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're going to start seeing names being committed to certain teams in less than 2 weeks.
Yep.
I mean, that's when we found out Cam Sutton. I was like not very long into the legal tampering period beginning that we saw that Cam Sutton was going to Detroit. So it's not gonna. We could find out about a Justin Fields trade based off of what the Bears said today. We could see Justin Fields traded as early as next week, maybe even this week. Just because if they get answers, because they're trying to decide what they want to do with their number 1 pick, and so if they feel like they can trade their number 1 pick and trade back, a few spots and still get, buy into Justin Fields and then get like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or whatever else, that's their prerogative. They can do that, but if they are dead set on, we're going to hold the number 1 pick, we don't like the offers, we don't feel like any of the offers we're getting is going to be exactly what we want, they can hold on to the number 1 pick, take a quarterback, and then they could try to do a right by Justin Fields and, make a trade.
Ben here says sign Mason, draft QB3. That seems to be the most likely scenario of what's going to happen by the time we get to the Trove. However, the reason why there's talk about Justin Fields and talk about Kirk Cousins and I'll say it, talk about Russell Wilson now at this point, is because if Mason Rudolph does not re-sign, the Steelers have to have some kind of plan to back up Kenny Pickett or to compete with Kenny Pickett at least. Yeah. And whether that's going quarterback first round or signing a free agent to compete with him, they have to have some kind of plan in place. So, look, I will say, just from my feel, I think Mason Rudolph re-signs. I think they draft QB3 somewhere on day 3, if not day 2. I think that's the most
day 2.
But I think that's the most likely situation that the Steelers are in, and that's the most likely thing that happens. But it's still okay. We're at the NFL Combine. Mm-hmm. GMs are here. Everybody's here, okay? Anybody who's anybody in the National Football League in a front office is in this town right now. So, yeah, Omar Khan's going to bump shoulders with Ryan Poles. Omar Khan's going to bump shoulders with George Patton of the Broncos. Omar Khan's going to bump shoulders.
I don't think the Broncos are going to trade Russell Wilson. I don't think the Broncos have any leverage in that situation.
Well, they're not going to, and that's the next point I wanted to get to. But point is, Omar Khan's bumping shoulders and having coffee and seeing all of these GMs. They're going to have conversations about it. Mm-hmm. It's just foregone. It's what's going to happen.
It's what GMs do.
It's name your price at this point. Mm-hmm. And it's name your price. And if there's any inkling, if there's even a 0.000 repeating 1% interest that Omar Khan and the Steelers have on Justin Fields, Omar Khan's going to look at Ryan Poles and give him a come here, let's chat. That's just what happens here. So you can't say it's a 0% when it's not a 0% at this stage.
Yeah, Mike in Texas asks what's left on Fields' contract. He's going into his 4th year, so he's a first-round pick. So he's going into his 4th year. There will be a 5th-year option on him. You have the team who ends up with Fields, whether the Bears hold on to him or whether he's traded, will have to decide on his 5th year this offseason. So if let's just hypothetically say the Steelers do acquire Fields, they will then have to decide his 5th-year option this year, the same as they have to do with Najee. Mm-hmm. The thing is that Fields is very affordable this upcoming season. He will not be very affordable for that 5th-year option. The 5th-year option will probably be in the mid-20s when it comes to around that 25 million mark, somewhere around there, based off of what quarterbacks are getting this year off of a 5th-year option.
Yep.
So, yeah, it will be expensive for sure. It just will. And, but that's what, and that's why I don't think that this is a very likely scenario to play out, because if you're willing to commit that kind of money, because I highly doubt they make this trade just to get him and then decline his 5th-year option. That doesn't really make any sense. Yep. So you acquire him, you pick up his 5th-year option. You're essentially giving up on Kenny Pickett, because you're not going to pick up an option on a quarterback, pay him in the mid-20s when it comes to millions of dollars, just to see maybe Kenny Pickett can beat him out for the starting. No, the book is closed on Kenny at that point, and the Steelers have given no indication right now that they're going to give up on Kenny Pickett. So
but let's make this clear, okay? The reason why we're talking about Fields and Wilson and Cousins and quarterback XYZ and not Mason Rudolph is because those have to be the options if Mason Rudolph does not re-sign. If we're going off of what Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin have publicly stated about Mason Rudolph, it's that they want Mason Rudolph back. Yep. That's not a 100% lock at this stage. So that's why we're discussing
his name's on the bottom of the contract.
Mark, thank you for that compliment. See, we love compliments too. Thank you. Mark says, love the show, look forward to it every day. Well, we love you, Mark, and we love looking forward to having you every day. Irving says, basically get Russ Wilson for free. Let's talk a little bit about Russell Wilson, who I don't think that's somebody that we've really talked about here on this show as a potential option for the Steelers. And again, put the asterisk on it, if you will. This is provided Mason Rudolph leaves. This could be an option. And here's the reason why it could be. It seems pretty foregone by this stage that the Broncos and Russell Wilson are going to be moving on from each other. It just feels like that's foregone. TLDR, the Broncos owe Russell Wilson a lot of money. Russell Wilson doesn't want to be in Denver anymore. Make it happen, right? And the Broncos have pick 13, and they could easily get a quarterback there. So there's some thought within circles, because the Broncos are still going to have to pay Russell Wilson a ton of money. If the Broncos cut Russell Wilson by St. Patrick's Day, the dead money is going to be huge, but they could prevent $37 million of that being written on the book. It's astronomical how much the Broncos overpaid for Russell Wilson. Only the Browns overpaying for Deshaun Watson is worse.
Probably.
At this stage.
Yeah.
So there's some thought that because basically the Broncos have to pay Russell Wilson, that he could maybe sign a contract to play for veteran minimum. And look, if Russell Wilson's willing to take vet minimum just to get out of Denver, one man's trash could be the other man's treasure. And that could mean the Steelers could come knocking. And I'm not saying that's option one or anything. Mm-hmm. I'm saying this is part of the contingency I feel they should look into if Mason Rudolph does not re-sign.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those situations where you kick the tires on it, you see what's there. You do your due diligence as GM. You make a phone call, you see what's there, what's the interest there, just to see. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily the most attractive option. I mean, Russell Wilson in his heyday was a very, very good quarterback. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, should have won a second if they just give the ball to Marshawn. He's been a great quarterback. He's going to be in the discussion for the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he actually makes it. I'm just saying he'll be in the discussion for it. So again, it's another one of those situations, and B-Phil kind of says it here. He says Wilson's done. I mean, there's also a lot of people saying that about, saying that about Ryan Tannehill. And again, if you bring in a quarterback like this, whose best days are behind them, you're mainly bringing that guy in they've got enough ability left and enough pedigree at the NFL level where they can still push Kenny Pickett for a starting position.
Correct.
Russell Wilson has enough left in the tank to push Kenny Pickett for a starting job, because I think, like, if push comes to shove, I think Russell Wilson does a better job than Kenny Pickett. Just my 2 cents.
26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 66 completion rate. That's decent.
Again,
decent enough.
I mean, yeah. I mean, how many touchdowns has Kenny Pickett thrown in his entire career? 13 in 25 games. I mean, there you go. He threw twice as many touchdowns just last season that Kenny has in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And again, you look at Wilson, you look at Ryan Tannehill, and those are guys who are kind of in that same realm of their best days are behind them, but they've still got enough there where it's like they can push Kenny Pickett for a starting job. So they both kind of fit under that same umbrella. It's just obviously that in terms of overall value, Ryan Tannehill is cheaper, but Russell Wilson becomes an option if you can sign him for a very cheap contract based off of the dead money that he's going to be getting from the Broncos. So it becomes an option for sure. And he's going to be one of the quarterbacks that I include in my chalk talk. I am going to also include Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, because obviously Kenny Pickett's on the roster and Mason Rudolph is the most likely guy to be added to the room. So yeah, I'll be looking at, I think I'm going to look at, I almost want to take Kirk Cousins off the list, because I feel like it's almost a foregone conclusion that he's going to be going back to the Vikings.
That's what it feels like. At least just based on what their GM and the head coach said today.
So just to, behind the scenes a little bit, I was going to include Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, and Kirk Cousins. I was going to do those 6.
Yeah.
I might take Kirk Cousins off that list just because, well, number one, for time's sake, you don't want to open something up and have to read 4,000 words, and I don't want to write 4,000 words either.
No,
but and B. Phil says Mason really needs to come back. He's ready. I mean, listen, I think, to continue to drive that home, I do think Mason Rudolph re-signing is the most likely scenario for the Steelers at quarterback here. It is the path of least resistance for what the Steelers want to do in terms of the cap, in terms of addressing all of the other needs that they have on the roster, like center, like off-ball linebacker, like cornerback, so maybe even tackle or defensive line. They've got a number of positions they need to address, and if you can re-sign Mason Rudolph to a 2-year deal that is very affordable, then there you go. You get a quarterback that can compete with Kenny, somebody who somebody who has familiarity with Mike Sullivan, who is the senior assistant on the offense. It makes a lot of sense to bring back Mason. Rico coming in with $10 contribution. Appreciate that. Said, missed yesterday's show. Can't say how excited I am to see in the Berg with your increased role. So awesome. Are you still going to be doing Southside Beat? Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I did talk about it yesterday. Yes, I will be continuing to do the Southside Beat. This show is not going anywhere. Yeah. I will continue to do it. Corey will continue to do it. We're not
not going anywhere.
Turk says, Chris, when you move, I call dibs on the poster behind you. So the only
Sports Day.
So this right here is actually a clip from the sports section of the Dallas Morning News when the Steelers won Super Bowl 43. And then this right here is actually an old banner. You might even be able to see it.
You're missing one, I think.
I am missing one.
Yeah.
It's missing the 2008 because this was purchased before they won Super Bowl 43, which is why that's there.
Yeah. Oh, here's another
Bulls are represented behind me.
Another good point for Mike Jobs too. Talking about the Giants here. Feel like the Giants are in the quarterback market too, based on what Joe Shane said today.
Yep.
Their GM. So would if you're looking at if you're trying to make a running list of teams that are in the market for a quarterback, add the Giants to it and add the Falcons to it as well. Mm-hmm. In fact, Raheem Morris today pretty much said, if the Falcons had good quarterback play, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. So does that kind of vindicate Arthur Smith a little bit?
Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely vindicates Arthur Smith. Are you kidding? That's exactly what it does. That's the definition of it, I think. That is what Raheem Morris said, the new Falcons head coach. Of course, taking over for Arthur Smith, the new Steelers offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
He said, if they had, paraphrase, if they had good quarterback play last year, I would not be here. So if that shows, number one, vindication for Arthur Smith. Number two, how important it is for Atlanta now to get the quarterback right. And you figure with them having a pretty high pick, they're going to be in the market. Maybe they're in the market for a Justin Fields, who's a Georgia native. I believe an Atlanta native specifically.
I don't
or close
remember.
to it. But point is, they could be in the market for Fields, Cousins, Wilson, whoever.
I don't know who it is, but I want to say
Or
whether
Mason,
whether it's FanDuel or whoever, I don't know. But in terms of odds, I think the Falcons are the most likely team to get Fields right now. Lifted One says not completely mad at the Steelers getting Fields, but the turnovers are atrocious. And listen, I said this on the show maybe last week, and I'll say it again. 30 picks in 3 years. That's not good. That's not even accounting for all the fumbles. But Mike this trade would not be done without Mike Tomlin signing off on it.
Correct.
And, because obviously the big immediate reaction is you would go to pull up, Pro Football Reference, type in Justin Fields' name, bring up his page, and you'd see all the turnovers, and you'd be like, yeah, no, Mike Tomlin would never put up with that. Well, that trade won't happen unless Mike Tomlin signs off on it. Not that Mike Tomlin is above Omar Khan, but Mike Tomlin has earned enough in that front office where Omar Khan isn't going to make a deal behind Mike Tomlin's back and not tell him what's going on. Mike Tomlin will absolutely be told or asked about, hey, I have this pretty much on the table. All we have to do is call and say, let's do it, and we're good to go. And Mike Tomlin will give his approval as well. So that also goes into, the triune decision making that the Steelers do with Art Rooney II, Omar Khan, and Mike Tomlin. So that trade won't happen without Mike Tomlin signing off on it. He will absolutely be okay with it. And I'm assuming that if the Steelers do end up pulling off that trade, that number one, they will not give up, as BJ says here, Field is a waste of draft picks. They will not be giving up draft picks that will hurt their ability to have a good draft class this year. And they will also be doing it with the intention that Arthur Smith's offense would be a very good fit for Justin Fields, which I will have a little bit more on that in Chalk Talk. So be on the lookout for that.
If Mason signs, good question from Cody. If Mason signs elsewhere, do you think Fields is the best available quarterback? Now, I mean, that's with respect to, I guess, trade or free agency, because I would argue that there are 3 quarterbacks in the draft that are better than Fields, between Williams, May, and perhaps Daniels. So at least 2. I think Drake May has potential to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. I think he's that good. I really think he is. So short of trading way up in the draft to get one of those 3, maybe. I mean, like, okay, is it Fields? Is it Wilson? Is it Cousins? I mean, those feel like they're the top 3.
Cousins is one. I would rank them as of right now, Cousins, Wilson, then Fields. But then that's, if you're looking beyond 2024, I might flip Fields and Wilson. Because Fields, it's only because Fields' ceiling is so high. And if he goes to the right situation with, where he's got weapons around him and he doesn't have to worry about being a playmaker every single play, and he can just play within the structure of the offense, then he can be very good. And then what he does, that's the thing with Justin Fields. And I think that's why it's so interesting that he could end up working if he were to be traded to Pittsburgh, is because Arthur Smith's offense is more quarterback friendly. It's one of the reasons why Ryan Tannehill took off under him. It is a system in which quarterbacks can thrive, because if they just play within the structure of the offense, especially with the play action and his ability to throw the ball down the field, I don't think anybody who understands football and knows football would argue that Justin Fields doesn't know how to throw a deep ball. He absolutely does. He knows how to throw a deep ball. There's a lot of other issues when you want to talk about Justin Fields, but his ability to throw a deep ball is not one of them. But what he does on top of that is if he can play within a structure of an offense, he can make that even greater by his ability to extend plays with his legs.
Yeah.
That's what puts his ability and his intrigue so high, because if he learns, and he showed flashes of it last year, if he shows the ability to play within the offense and know and understand when to allow his athleticism to take over, that's when he can become very, very dangerous. Yeah. And that's why there is intrigue around him, no matter if it's the Steelers trading for him, the Falcons, anybody else, the Giants, whoever it is.
Chris in the chat says, should the Steelers trade up to grab one of those top 3 quarterbacks?
No,
that's
you want to
too
talk
much.
about giving up trade. You want to talk about giving up capital to get a quarterback?
That's too much.
You'd be having to give up a lot to get one of those 3 quarterbacks talking about in the draft.
Yeah, that's
compared to what you'd have to give up Justin Fields. Not even close. Not even close.
Nope. Cody says the more everyone talks quarterback options, the more I hope Mason is back. That's also valid. I think that's very valid too. And I think still, as we sit here on day 1 of the combine, I think that's still the most likely scenario for the Steelers. I think that's where it ultimately ends up. I think it ultimately ends up as Pickett, Rudolph, and day 3 draft pick. That's
beat that horse to death.
Yeah.
Like Corey and I are going to beat that horse to death, because anytime we talk about Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson, there's
the reaction goes, whoa!
Yeah, the reaction goes like, why are you guys talking about this? Yeah. It's just because, like, listen, we've got a lot of time to talk about this kind of stuff. We talk for at least a half an hour every single day, 5 days a week. We got time to talk about this kind of stuff. So why not open up Pandora's box and see what the possibilities are, just in case the most likely scenario doesn't play out, because guess what? That's not guaranteed.
Spice Creations, you're 100% correct. The Steelers, she says, we're not winning no playoff game with just those 2 in a draft pick. You're 100% correct, but they have to try. They have to try.
They don't have to. I mean, they don't have to. They would. Okay, that's a completely different situation, because for me personally, and I said this last week, for me personally, I'm fine with a plan in which you close the book on Kenny, but that doesn't mean the Steelers are, and that doesn't mean that you are, that doesn't mean that anybody else is. I'm just saying that's me personally. But I also understand why the Steelers might not want to close the book on Kenny, because you don't just throw away first-round picks.
No.
I get it. I understand it. And and the Steelers have to make a decision on Kenny next offseason, no matter what. They have to make a decision on him, because they have to commit to whether they want to pick up his 5th-year option next year or not. So they have to know. So it would behoove the Steelers to let Kenny have a real crack, a real opportunity to be the guy in year 3. And why I do think that is as we sit right now, the most likely starter for the Steelers in week 1 is Kenny Pickett, because he's the only quarterback on the roster. Now, if Mason Rudolph is re-signed, that chance goes down a little bit, and then we'll see what happens in training camp. If Mason Rudolph signs elsewhere, then we'll see what the Steelers do to add to the room. And then that's why we're talking about all these other, possibilities, because we don't know what's going to happen. We'll have a much clearer picture in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think a good topic, once Omar Khan talks, and maybe even 2 Omar Khan, is how long should Mason sign for if it's in Pittsburgh? Is it 1 year? Is it 2?
2.
If it's one, then that decision to pick up the 5th-year option for Kenny becomes more interesting. And I don't think the Steelers should do that. I think what the Steelers should do is go for a 2-year deal, and only 2 years, and not more than 2 years. Not more, not less. 2 years. Because number one, you'll have the legitimate competition between Mason and Kenny in training camp. Mason's going into his age 30 season. So you'll have the legitimate competition that you want between Mason and Kenny in training camp. If Mason loses that job, then okay, no harm, no foul. They have him for 1 more year. If he wins that job, then okay, you have him for 1 more year, and you won't have Kenny. And you won't have Kenny to worry about the 5th-year option, and you could start fresh at the quarterback position again. What?
Bob's got me in stitches, man. Bob says, I'd rather have Tony Ramos, my GPS, than Pickett in week 1. Oh, make a U-turn, Jim! Oh man, I'm sorry. That had me in stitches.
Reginald,
Ooh, that was funny.
Reginald, you'll be
Bob got
glad
me.
when the QB stuff is over, he says. Here's the sad reality of the NFL. It may never be over. You don't know when it's going to be over. And even when you think it's over, it's still not over.
Yeah, I mean, listen. If Mason resigns, the only thing that we know from that point is going to be, okay, there's going to be a competition at St. Vincent College in Latrobe when these guys open camp. And we'll be watching that like a hawk. There will be at least a little bit of a lull.
It'll be 2022 training camp again.
Uh,
where you're charting every rep for Mason and every rep for Kenny.
See, and here's the thing. Listen, I covered that training camp. Okay. And I did the quarterback tracker every single day. And yeah, I counted reps, but listen, reps at training camp really don't mean almost anything. Like, oh, this guy threw 3 picks today.
I mean, throwing 3 picks in a day is noteworthy. That's
yeah,
noteworthy.
but I don't know. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's still training camp because you don't know what the quarterback's trying to do, like what he's specifically working on, what the receiver's specifically working on, the play, the concept. There's so many other variables that go into it. And B. Phil says, yeah, 2022 was a farce. It was. There was not a quarterback competition in 2022. I don't care what anybody says. Mitch Trubisky was always going to be the starter, no matter what. Nobody who was covering that team even for a day thought that anybody else was going to have a chance to get the starting job over Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah.
I don't think Mitch Trubisky ever surrendered a first-team rep the entire camp, and if he did, you could count him on one hand for the entire camp. He was the first-team guy all the way. That never changed. Ben,
I'll absolutely acknowledge this. Ben says, we also have to start to acknowledge that we may be in another Brady black hole with Mahomes sitting on top of the AFC for a decade. Yeah, we're in that right now, believe it or not.
Yeah. And listen, and that's why, and listen, I completely agree with Art Rooney II prioritizing quarterback play over just about anything else because it's ultimately what wins in this game. This is a quarterback-driven league, and yes, that's become a trend like over the last decade or so. But again, I went back and did the math. 75% of Super Bowls have been won by quarterbacks that are either in the Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame. That's not an accident. That's not some sort of fluke thing. You have to have quality quarterback play to win in this league. And if you don't, you better have an all-time defense. That's pretty much the way it goes. You can try and win a Super Bowl a non-conventional way, but your chances go way down.
Yep.
So it's just that's why there's so much focus on quarterback, because guess what? We didn't have to talk about quarterback in Pittsburgh for 18 years because Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback and he's an all-time quarterback, a future Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to talk about quarterback because you had the position figured out. You had one of those guys.
Yeah. Exactly. You had one.
And that's the reason why quarterback was talked about so much when it was Bubby Brister and Mark Malone and Neil O'Donnell and Mike Tomczak and Cordell Stewart and Tommy Maddox and Kent Graham and all those guys, because none of those guys were the answer. Cordell Stewart's probably the closest thing, even though he never played in the Super Bowl.
Here's the other sad reality of it, too. Either when teams have that quarterback, there are always a couple out there, a couple silent voices out there that are, well, I don't know about this one. No, you have one. If you have one, you have one. And when you know, you know. Yeah. And right now, we know the Steelers don't have it. And with Ben for 18-plus years, we knew they had one. And there was never – look, if Ben Roethlisberger in his prime was a quarterback of the Steelers right now, we wouldn't even be thinking about Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson. But when you're starved for a quarterback, when you need a quarterback, this is what you do. You not only overthink to a certain extent, but you overdo. And it's right to overdo when it comes to the speculation and asking. There's no questions. There's no stone that should be unturned when it comes to examining the quarterback position for any team that needs a quarterback. That's just how this works, because teams that need quarterbacks, they're desperate for that position. They're going to be desperate for just about everything else, including winning. Like you said, Chris, 75% of quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls are either Hall of Famers or are going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point. Again, not an accident. That position drives the sport. So there's no such thing as overdoing it. That's why when you have at NFL Rumor Mill on X saying, whoa, Bears and Fields and Steelers, that's because people eat that kind of stuff up.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, people eat that kind of stuff up. We were talking, look, okay, there are going to be players that I speak with this week that will say, yes, I met with the Steelers. No, I did not meet with the Steelers. Or, no, I did not meet with the Steelers yet, but I plan to. That doesn't mean they're going to be Pittsburgh Steelers or they're not going to be Pittsburgh Steelers.
No, there's a lot of people that met with the Steelers last year that weren't drafted.
Exactly.
That's part of it.
I saw Christian Gonzalez walk into the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex for his top 30 visit. He wasn't a Steeler, but they did their diligence on him anyway. And look, go back to what my favorite, not just because I'm the one that asked the question, my favorite Mike Tomlin response last year, because I think it was very organic and it meant something, was when he talked about Will Anderson right before they played the Texans. And I asked him, I was like, listen, did you get to know this guy at the combine? What is he like? And he beamed about Will Anderson. 4 or 5 years from now, the players that they're meeting with at this combine are going to be or could be free agents. So if the Steelers meet with Jackson Powers-Johnson but don't draft him, that doesn't mean he's never going to be a Steeler.
That's why, and that's why
they do this.
That's why they do this. And a couple of people brought up, yes, Cordell Stewart did play in Super Bowl 30. It was his rookie year with Slash. I did know that. I just forgot, and because he wasn't the quarterback, and I was thinking purely from a quarterback perspective. Yes, that was his rookie year where he was Slash Stewart. And what's funny is that I'm a bit of a masochist at times. So I watched Super Bowl 30 not that long ago, a couple days ago.
Sicko.
Yeah. Because you know what? Like it had been a long time. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sit down and rewatch this game, and I'm gonna see exactly like just to rewatch it back in real time. And that's
good comment from TJ.
Yeah.
But Mike Tomlin will get caught in a clip smiling at a player, and everyone will assume they're a Steeler. There's a meme on Twitter, X, where it's like Squidward from SpongeBob in a crow's nest with a telescope, and he's pointing down at a person, and the text just says Steeler. Like, that's him. Like, guys, come on. Speaking of Ramon, no DK and Ramon today, and I don't think no DK and Ramon at all this week, to be honest with you.
One, I know that
DK's in Bradenton.
Yeah.
And Ramon's here in Indianapolis. I know that because I saw him today.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's going to be DK and Ramon all week this week. So that just means that I have to do my diligence to show up at 3 p.m. every day, no matter the circumstance. That's going to be hard, but we'll make it work. Find a way. We do have to get out of here, though. I'll be in Indianapolis all week. And
Saturday.
Chris,
Saturday's when you're leaving, I think.
Till Saturday. Yep. Chris has live cues today on DKPittsburghSports.com. So he's answering all Steelers questions. I will be answering Steelers questions tomorrow all day. So make sure you jump in on that. Please download the app, the DK Pittsburgh Sports app off the Apple App Store, Google Play Store if you have not done so yet. That's where all my content's going. It's going right to that app, period, or DKPittsburghSports.com on your desktop. It's all going there. So everything that I collected today or I just observed or I felt important at least to put in that feed, that's what I did. So it's all right there. You can read it now. I'm going to go work on a longer form story now. We'll be back tomorrow, 3 p.m. for the Southside Beat. He's Chris. I'm Corey. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, I wanted to clarify something here real quick.
What do you got?
There were some reactions to me using the word masochist. I'm using the general use of the definition of a person who enjoys an activity that appears to be painful or tedious, not the other definition that people are thinking. Just to clarify that.
This isn't that kind of show.
It is not that kind of a show. And I know I am not that kind, just for the record, not that we need to get that personal here or anything like that, but I am not that type of person.
We'll get back to football tomorrow.
I just had to clarify that so that nobody went back and played this and was like, wow, Chris is into some freaky stuff.
We're going to end on that note.
We're going to end on that note.
Goodbye, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.